in MAR Fund. First of all, I would like to share with you that today we're going to have a bilingual session. One of our presenters will be speaking in English and the other in Spanish. So we also have simultaneous interpretation. So please choose the language you need. Here are the instructions on screen on how to activate the interpretation. And if you can hear me, then you are connected. If you need to listen to it in Spanish, select Spanish or English, and mute original audio is optional.
The English channel available. Just need to select the language of your preference on the Zoom controls. And if you like, you can mute the original audio and select to only hear the interpreted language. Tenemos algunas reglas básicas
We
del
have some basic rules or procedures. First of all, this is a space for learning and respect that is being encouraged. We ask you also to mute microphones and disable cameras during this seminar. Please enter your full name, country, and organization in the chat box. You can post your questions in the Zoom chat or the question space, which will be answered or by our panelists today. Those of you participating via Facebook Live, you can also submit your questions through the Facebook comments sections, and those will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Your questions will be transferred at the end. All these opinions expressed in these webinars are exclusive responsibility of the speakers and doesn't necessarily represent the opinion and position of MARFund. Today, the topic we're going to be discussing is environmental and social safeguards in coastal marine conservation projects in the MAR region. We know we're going to learn a lot about safeguards by our presenters today, but I would like to share with all of the audience today what are environmental and social safeguards. These are elements that ensure that all projects have a substantial net benefit to the environment and communities in the Mar region, our dearly loved Mar region. And these help us avoid, minimize, and mitigate their environmental and social risks and impacts under a very basic principle of do no harm and do good. MARFAN began its implementation in 2022. This seminar is very timely after 2 years of implementation, and our presenters today will share their experience throughout these years, a joint effort with organizations to reach implementation and follow-up. There are 54 projects that have implemented or are currently implementing projects thanks to MARFund. Today we have two of our star organizations present who will talk to us about how this process has been ongoing. They're going to give us tips. They're going to share with us a lot of knowledge, and please ask them questions. And I'm very honored and very happy to present to you the first organization that we're going to hear about today, which is Centinelas del Agua A.C. This is an organization, it's a non-profit organization in Mexico, founded in 2011 to protect the aquifer of the Yucatan Peninsula from contamination. As many of us know, we have water scarcity that is becoming a global concern. Their focus is to protect this vital resource for present and future generations. They advocate for a new water culture which emphasizes responsible water use and sustainable development practices. Please visit their website, centinelasdelagua.org, and their social media. They've participated with us before, so please visit our Marfan webpage as well, where you can hear and see their presentations of their wonderful work. Today, it's an honor for us to have Alejandro López Tamayo. He's a general director. He is an environmental engineer with a specialty in groundwater, graduated from the University of Guanajuato, professor in water sciences in the area of hydrogeology at the Centro de Investigación Científica of Yucatan. He is the winner of the 2020 Ecological Merit Award. He has participated in several research projects in the area of hydrogeology. From 2014 to 2017, he served as coordinator in the water conservation program at Amigos de Ciencan. In July 2017, he joined Centinelas del Agua as a scientific coordinator. He's a founding member of the Karst Consulting in March 2018 and is a lecturer at the University of Anahuac, Cancun, teaching the subjects of hydrology and geology since 2020. And currently, he is the general director of Centinelas del Agua. Alejandro, welcome. The next organization we're going to hear from is the Sarteneja Alliance for Conservation and Development. The Sarteneja Alliance was first established in 2008 as a partnership of local organizations with the goal of conserving and protecting the Corozal Bay Wildlife Sanctuary in northern Belize. Since being granted co-management authority from the CBWS in 2012 in partnership with the Belize Forestry Department, SACD has continued to grow in size and capacity, gaining respect locally, nationally, and internationally as an effective and collaborative MPA co-manager. They are responsible for co-management of both CBWS and Bacalar Chico National Park with diverse ecologies and stakeholders. Today, we have the pleasure of having with us as part of our panelists, Samuel Barrett. He is the Bachelor of Science in Medical Biochemistry, and he is the Development Manager of ASACD. He first joined ASACD in January 2020 as a volunteer marketing intern to establish its tourism business arm. He has developed skills as a grant writer, project manager, and conservation planner, and now designs and oversees the majority of SACD's project-based work, responsible for the development, implementation, and socialization of environmental social safeguards in all SACD programs. Welcome, both of you, and we invite you to go to their website and social media to investigate more about their work, as well as all our efforts in Marfund here on screen. You can follow us and learn more. Without further ado, I now want to introduce to you Samuel Barrett.
You will share a lot of insights for us that will be really helpful. So thank you so much. And the floor is yours. You can start sharing your presentation.
Thank you very much, Carla. 2 seconds. Just to confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you very much. As Carla has so very nicely introduced me, I am, apologies. Apologies, let me try that one more time. Okay, thank you very much, Carla, for that kind introduction. My name is Sam. I am the development manager at SACD. And today I'm going to be talking to you and hopefully providing some reassurance and some guidance, especially for those of us who are new to these systems and to safeguards, and provide some help and some advice on how we can be effective at managing safeguards, especially in smaller organizations with less experience doing these kind of things. So firstly, Carla has briefly spoken about what are safeguards, what is ESMS, what does it all mean? So risk is everywhere. Every project that we implement will have some amount of risk, no matter how small the project or no matter how small the risk. These safeguards and these systems, it's here to help us identify and manage those risks. ESMS's environmental and social management systems, screening tools, these are all tools that have been provided to help us. As Carla's mentioned, safeguards and these systems are here to not only help us do no bad. I think this is where most people are thinking when they think of safeguards. For example, how do I stop my staff getting hurt? Am I being an equal opportunities employer? And this is certainly a good place to start with your safeguards, but we can do more as organizations. How can we do good? What more can we do to help protect the most vulnerable and the most effective by the work that we're doing in protected areas and in our communities? How can we improve engagement and our accountability with stakeholders and build stronger relationships that are so important for protected area management? We need to be thinking, can I be creating enabling environments, for example, areas of female empowerment that are going to impact? I'll speak slightly more about the example of gender later on in my presentation. When we're looking at risks, we need to think, can we avoid this risk entirely? Can we mitigate against it? Can we achieve more by anticipating and understanding these risks? That's what safeguards, environmental social action plans are for, providing a structured framework that can help us achieve more impact with our projects. Now, we can be honest, anyone who's ever written a proposal, no matter how small, knows that they can be daunting and time-consuming. And to some people, this may now seem like we're being asked to do even more. But are we? These systems have been developed to guide and help our planning and think beyond the risks we would normally identify, taking us a step further from simply identifying the most common or the most prevalent risk for an activity. This can help us streamline risk management and also reduce our workload once these safeguards and systems are in place within our organizations. However, if this is your first time, this can still feel like extra work, especially if you're a part of a small team. You might only be a couple of individuals. So what can we do to make our lives easier while also being more effective at what we do? Now, if you've ever been through the ESMS process, the acronyms, the documents, the tools, they can all seem overwhelming. But you need to remember that we're not alone. We all have partners. Have they had to manage similar risks before? Do they have a policy or a document they can share with you and you could adopt? Look to your team. They will be the ones who have been implementing safeguards in your community for many years, whether it's been through an ESMS system or not. They know your stakeholders the best. How have they managed situations in the past? What worked, what didn't? Why? These are all important things that can help you when you're developing your safeguards. And finally, look to your donor. Every funding donor I've ever worked with, and that includes Marfund, has always been happy to discuss and help to develop appropriate safeguards. It benefits everyone, including the donor, if effective safeguards are developed and implemented. Always, please, I really encourage you, always make full use of the support that is provided when making your application. There are people out there who can help you. Now, here's the trick. The screening tools, the safeguards, all of these systems that you will encounter, they are the same. Depending on the donor, they might have a slightly different format, but the safeguards and the risks that are being triggered are the same. If you're being asked for something once, you can bet the next time you're writing a project or you're working with a new funder, similar things are going to be asked of you. This is where I encourage you, institutionalize these safeguards within your policies, within your staff handbooks. Do you have a gender policy for your organization? Could you adopt one? Does a partner have one that they could help you adopt? Speak to your donor. It may be that actually within your policies, you're already effectively managing this risk. You just need to be able to identify how you're managing it and build it within your action plan. By institutionalizing these documents, the next time a funding opportunity comes along, you will be ready to go and you will find the workload has been reduced massively. Now, developing safeguards is just the first step. You can develop the best safeguards in the world, but you are not achieving anything unless they are actually being implemented in your communities. You need to know who is responsible for implementing these safeguards, who is responsible for monitoring. What is that person going to need? What exactly will they do? Without a concrete plan, you can often find yourself feeling lost. Now remember, you are part of a team. Some of this team will have been involved in the development of your safeguards and part of the planning process, but some of them will not. By having an environmental social action plan, this can help to really communicate and remind the people who need to be implementing these safeguards exactly what is expected from them. You also need to consider how you will monitor these safeguards. If you can't monitor the safeguards, then it's almost the same as them not being implemented. You need to make sure that they are implemented and monitored in order to be able to improve and have a greater impact through their implementation. Now, proper planning can do more than just make sure safeguards are implemented properly. And I know this from my own personal experience. Project funding, especially in Belize, because of the exchange rate to the US, is always tight. We've all, I'm sure, wished in the past that the funding could be just a little bit higher. But the good news, and certainly for us, is most of the budget of what you will need can already be found within your project. Build your safeguarding plan as part of your project implementation plan. Don't duplicate work. You all need to be collecting methods of verification. You need to be collecting your supporting documents. Include the monitoring of your safeguards as part of these activities, and you can essentially reduce this cost to zero. Of course, there will always be occasions where perhaps you can't reduce this cost to zero, especially when training, for example, is involved. But think about your co-financing projects. Do you have another project that is co-financing this? They're probably using a similar safeguarding system. And so you can spread these costs across your different projects and reduce the burden on one specific budget. So look at the process that we've been through so far. We've built our team. We've looked to our staff. We've looked to our partners, and we've looked to our funder. This level of collaboration is so important in all area of project management and implementation, and it's no less true for safe monitoring and implementation. We've identified our risks. We've used the systems and the tools that have been provided, and we've used them to take advantage to discover new risks we may not have identified previously. We worked with our teams to work out how we can mitigate or avoid these risks. If you can avoid a risk entirely, do it. The lower your project's risk, the more attractive it will seem to a donor. Sometimes this is not possible, though. So work with your team, work out how we can mitigate against this risk. Remember, they have been working in the communities. They know your stakeholders. Use this knowledge to help create effective safeguards that will have an impact. We've made our plan, and don't overcomplicate this. Remember that the team implementing your project is already thinking about 1,000,001 things. Don't make their life any more complex than it needs to be. You are relying on them. They are the most important tool that you have to make sure that these safeguards are successfully implemented. And without them, you cannot succeed. And finally, you found your budget, or hopefully, as we've been fortunate enough to do, manage to address these concerns internally or seek partner support when needed to help us meet some of these costs without it becoming a burden on the project funds. So we're done, right? We can stop worrying or thinking about this now. This is where we take an extra hurdle and it becomes a powerful tool. We need to review and revise. We need to look back critically at our safeguards. Has it been effective? Has it achieved what we wanted it to achieve? Don't wait for the project to end to do this. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with your team, your partners, and your donor. If something isn't working, don't try to hide it. As I've said, we are all on the same team. It is beneficial for us all that these safeguards are effective. It's very tempting, I admit, once the money has come, to just accept something isn't working and move on. But we are implementing projects on behalf of our stakeholders, and that's who these safeguards are here to protect. And therefore, their safety and well-being should be your primary concern. I will give you an example now. For example, we have been trying for many years now to hire female enforcement officers. Now, our first plan was to make sure that all of our posts spoke about us being equal opportunity employers. Or we then moved on. We were then contacting women directly and encouraging them to apply. Now, this got us to a point where we were successful in receiving applications for female enforcement officers. However, we are an equal opportunities employer. And because it is such a male-dominated environment, there are very few women who have this experience and the qualifications to be able to, the experience and the qualifications to be able to be competitive in these positions. So what have I learned through this? We need to create a better enabling environment, looking at how do we create female empowerment in these roles, looking at a national level about creating internship programs and scholarships that allow women to build these skills and experience and therefore apply on an equal playing field. This is the next step that I'm hopefully going to be taking through a network. And I really think that this is now how I'm going to be advancing this particular safeguard and start to achieve more impact rather than just being able to encourage females to apply for these roles. I want to speak about two specific examples about safeguards that I've been implementing with support from our fund. The first was a construction project. As Carla introduced me, we also have a tourism business arm that we established shortly after I arrived in Belize and started working for SACD. And part of our plan to be able to build this financial sustainability mechanism was to be able to construct a building that would be able to host expedition groups. Now, working with contractors presents some unique challenges. Unfortunately, and I will defend myself here and say that my father works in construction, unfortunately, the field does have a poor history of gender-based violence against women. And this is recognized by your donors, and it is something that you would need to recognize when you're developing your safeguards. They're often working beyond your direct supervision. You're probably working with a third party that you don't have direct control over them. They may also be working in a remote location away from your home base, making it more difficult to be able to monitor these safeguards. Universally, if you are including construction within your project, this is considered a high-risk area. So we need to work out how we're going to address this and be able to monitor it effectively, especially being part of a small team. So let's go back to our steps that we talked about earlier. Building our team. Remember to consider everyone is part of the team. But this included actually working with the lead contractors. And part of the screening was to see what kind of safeguards and risks they were already implementing in their team. We were very fortunate to be working with a contractor who actually met a lot of the requirements of the safeguards and the environmental social action plan, and allowed us to work with him to more just structure this within his contract. Identifying the risks. Now, as I've said, with construction, this comes with a twofold risk. There are physical risks to the construction team that need to be managed, but also potential risks that can be caused by the construction team. When we're talking about mitigating or avoiding, this is one of the reasons that construction is so challenging. Merely by working with a construction team, you will have risks that can't be avoided. So mitigating is so important, and having a lead contractor that already has experience, although they may not know it, mitigating these risks is such an important aspect. When it comes to making our plan, as I've said, he was already implementing a lot of safeguards to protect his team. What this meant is that when we developed the contract and through a discussion with him, we were able to develop a site code of conduct, similar to a code of conduct that you will have with your staff, but specifically referencing the risks and safeguards that were triggered through the screening process. We were then very strict, and because it was included within the legal contract, any instance of non-compliance with any of the safeguards would trigger termination of the contract, and that was agreed upon by both parties. All it then took was one surprise monitoring visit shortly after the start of construction, and we were able to see that they were following all of those safeguards. By conducting a surprise visit, it may have seemed a little bit unfair to them, but it gave us the reassurance that we needed, that the instructions and the requirements that we had were being followed. And finally, finding your budget. As Carla mentioned, this system was rolled out in 2022 at around the same time that we were developing projects to develop this construction. And this is how I know that it is possible to reduce these monitoring budgets to zero. So our project was actually approved before the environmental social management system had been implemented by Marfund, but the project didn't actually begin implementation until after it had been rolled out. What this meant is we actually had to develop our safeguards, our code of conduct, without being given the opportunity to budget for this within the project, because the budget was already locked and approved. So I know that it is possible. It will not always be possible, but I do really encourage you to seek the support where you can, because it is possible to be able to manage and monitor and develop these safeguards without incurring a massive cost to yourselves or your project. Another example I'd like to speak about is working with enforcement. This is another area where it will nearly always be considered high risk, mainly due to the human rights concerns. Article 9 of the UN Convention of Universal Human Rights states that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. So looking at our rangers, what do they need? They need proper training that is regularly updated so that they are fully aware of the laws of detention, of use and force, so that they are aware the boundaries of what they are able to do, and they can feel confident doing the enforcement work that they need. But even with the best intentions, concerns may arise from your stakeholders. So how do we deal with this challenge? And this is something that is going to be asked of you through pretty much every safeguarding system you have, which is to develop a grievance mechanism. So when we developed a grievance mechanism, I used a visualization process. I used a flowchart. You can see part of the flowchart here, and I'd be happy to share the full flowchart with anyone who wanted to. This really helped me to visualize the process all the way through, with levels of escalation, de-escalation, and resolution. You do need to think about escalation. Ideally, a complaint would be resolved informally and at an earliest possible opportunity. But if it can't be resolved, how will you escalate, and who will you escalate to? Think about, is this a breach of conduct, of policy, or the law? Because that will guide where and how this needs to be escalated. Who needs what skills? Every single person on your team should be able to receive a formal complaint. If you want to make a complaint and you go to someone and they tell you that they're not able to accept your complaint, it reflects incredibly badly on you, and it shows that individual, or there's a perception that your organization is not caring about their complaint. Conflict resolution skills training can help to resolve these conflicts before they need escalating. So make sure the people who are on your front line, your field staff, have these skills and these training, and make the process simple and easy to use by all of your staff and the stakeholders who need to access the system. This may seem backwards, but do not accept anonymous complaints. It seems strange because you want to be able to protect the complainant, but in order to be able to investigate and resolve a complaint, you need to know the complainant's details so that you can follow up with them. Also look at your internal and external complaints. You may need to have a system to raise complaints within your staff. This is sometimes called a whistleblower policy. You need to be able to protect both your staff and external stakeholders, and also provide this mechanism for them to be able to raise concerns if they feel they need to. And finally, you need to go back to reviewing and revising. Like I said, this is what it makes a powerful tool. The indicator of a good complaint system or mechanism isn't that you are receiving no complaints, but that your complaints are being successfully resolved. For example, our current complaint system that we've rolled out since 2022 has not received any complaints. I like to think that personally, this is because, and we do have a very strong relationship with our stakeholders. And I feel that they do have the confidence if they felt they needed to raise a complaint, they would. But we can't know this. If we're not receiving any complaints and we're not able to resolve them, how do we know this is being implemented effectively? So this has shown me that I can really improve this system. I need to go back and work out what is it that is the reason. Is it that we are fortunate and everyone is happy? Or is it that there are complications, they're not understanding the process, that they're nervous about repercussions against them? So this is an area that I'm now going to be improving through the next project cycles. And really, this is what I really want to get back to. This is where it becomes powerful. Don't become complacent. Build on what you have and improve what you have, and you will see the benefits. Now, in closing, when I was asked to give this presentation, I was asked to, and I will quote Carla here, shed some love on the safeguards. As you may imagine, they're not very popular. Now, this really surprised me because I believe, and I really truly believe, that we are doing this for the benefit of our stakeholders. Everything we do should be about that. However, if you are part of this group, and hopefully I've convinced you today that developing these safeguards doesn't have to be extra work and extra money, and that we can create real good and impact for our stakeholders through this. However, if I have failed to convince you, and I am sorry to both you and Marfund if I have, because I have failed you, then as a very last resort to convince you, I will share with you my mantra that helps me get through difficult times when things get challenging. I ask you this: do you want the money? That has to be our bottom line. If you need motivation, we need this. Our stakeholders need it. It's time to get on board. These safeguards aren't going anywhere. Finally, I have said all the way through this presentation, we're all on the same team. We're all here to help. And I really do mean that. If you need advice, if you need templates, whatever you need, if I have it, if I have any experience with it, then I want to share it with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was really insightful. I think that you convinced a few of our public, of our audience here, of that's the importance of safeguards. As I mentioned at the beginning, SACD has been one of the star organizations implementing this. I know that they have several tools that can be very useful to all of our grantees here, to all of our partners. So thank you so much, Sam, and congratulations for all this great work that you are doing. And I know that there will be a lot of questions for you. Some people are now requesting the diagram of the grievance mechanism you show. So we will be solving and responding to all your questions at the end of Alejandro's presentations, but you can start adding those questions there on our chat space. So thank you so much, Sam. Y vamos a dar inicio. Alejandro, muchas gracias también por...
Okay, now we're going to welcome Alejandro. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to hear from you and learn what Centinelas del Agua has been doing in terms of safeguards. This will be very, very useful for all of us joining us, our partners, our beneficiaries. We're all here. So please, Alejandro, go ahead and welcome. Thank you.
Sí, se ve muy bien.
Please confirm if you can see my screen. Very well. Perfect. So we're going to begin now. As you've seen what safeguards are, we're going to tell you a little bit about our experience carrying out
las salvaguardas
and comprehending or understanding what
y otro
safeguards
implementar
are and how to implement them at an institutional level into each project so that links of trust or bonds can be created between the communities and the organization. So we're going to see some of the protocols and the tools and how they function. I also want to share with you who we are. We have four main programs: scientific investigation, conservation, water governance, and education and culture for sustainability. We began in 2008 to protect the aquifer of the peninsula of Yucatan and its associated systems. And these pillars or programs today are precisely where we are implementing these safeguarding environmental and social mechanisms.
ambientales
Why did
sociales,
this topic come up? We saw a very clear trend between all the international donors who wish to ensure that all these projects have a clear environmental and social safeguard. And that is when they began talking about this topic. The topic became more relevant,
los proyectos.
and that is where we began these projects. That is
¿De qué
where
forma
we
también
began to see how, at an institutional level, we were going to implement these
Centinelas del Agua A.C. está comprometido con la
water
sostenibilidad
sentinels
y el
is
respeto a los derechos humanos, con congruencia, transparencia
committed to environmental sustainability and respect of human rights, congruence, transparency, accountability, successful projects. So we saw that these pillars were going to be fundamental.
éxito en la ejecución de los proyectos. ¿Cuántos no hemos escuchado hablar de historias
How
donde
many of us have not heard about participation has not been clear? There's misunderstandings. There are these threads that we need to know and how to address them.
había una gran duda que
And
yo
there
creo
was an enormous doubt, and most of those present here, the first time we heard about safe social environmental safeguards was a question. When we saw about this webinar, the announcement, this is the face we made. That's the same face I implement environmental social
entre con el
safeguard
miedo y por supuesto
guidelines, and I was afraid. What is this? What is this going to imply?
vamos a tener el personal preparado o no y entonces
Are we going to have the budget ready? This emoji represents very closely what we have in mind.
a partir de ahí es que ya nos sentamos y
From
empezamos
there,
a
we
organizarnos
decided to get organized. We saw that the need to focus on this work from 2021 on, and we began implementing this theoretical part at an institutional level. These are institutional policies and commitments that provide processes and tools to identify, assess, and manage, avoid, or mitigate adverse environmental and social risks and impacts, and maximize positive impacts associated with the projects that CDA designs, implements, and or finances. This is how we are focusing or adopting this definition of environmental and social safeguards, and therefore this face of anguish was, or this emoji was turning into more satisfaction and tranquility.
¿Cuáles
These tools
íbamos a
helped
hablar
us
desde Centinelas del Agua a nivel institucional?
address what was the approach that we were going to
Tiene que formar primero
focus on. We know that this is first addressed at an institutional level. These tools are then implemented in each of the projects because each one is different. Some can focus on construction, some no.
entonces qué
Some can
herramientas
be taking transportation by boat with fuels. What are the different risks? And it's all at an institutional level to have social environmental safeguards incorporated and making an exclusion list, environmental social questionnaire,
generar un mecanismo de atención y reclamo.
mechanisms for grievance. And this is also a very important aspect to address it, how this was going to, what it's going to look like. The national applicable legislation, they have to coincide with the national norms, and it had to be integrated to what has already been written. And finally, the creating of all the forms and of these environmental and social safeguards. That is where the first idea began, where a first element was to focus on communities where we know they have no internet access, no phone access sometimes to, so that to share these grievances. So that's where we created these boxes
Tener
and
también un acercamiento
implemented them with all the projects. This was a mechanism of approaching the communities, and it was a simple method. I'm going to mention a list of Centinelas del Agua, exclusion list. Everything that has to do with use of changing the use of soil and deforestation, conversion and degradation, programs of
sedimentación y contaminación de cuerpos de agua,
management of ANPs, and overfishing, contamination products, vulnerability of human rights. All of these are part of this exclusion list. In child or forced labor, violence and gender, exploitation and sexual abuse, and political proselytism is all excluded. We have to be very clear on what is going to be excluded from the implementation of the projects to ensure these actions are not being developed in these projects. So how were all these 11 safeguards born through this risk management method? First, we thought about
de la contaminación, la salud y seguridad de las
evaluation. These are all the evaluation, risk management, labor and working conditions, efficiency of resources and pollution prevention, health and safety in the communities, acquisition of land and restriction, conservation of biodiversity, indigenous peoples, cultural heritage, gender. All of these have a system of evaluation and monitoring and their respective forms. Here you can see social environmental safeguards that have each one their specific forms and procedures for follow-up of each. In risk management, it is to identify and assess, management assessment of the potential environmental and social risk. There is a level of a project risk level. Sometimes we can see that this needs to be evaluated. There's also a monitoring and evaluation. There's also work conditions that have to do with guaranteeing, respect, and protect the fundamental labor rights of Centinelas del Agua. All of this includes the procedures on implementing these safeguards and how they are activated.
Un proyecto.
when beginning a project. With a new norm, 035, which is a new norm, labor norm
nos
in
dicta
Mexico, has to agree with our safeguards. Something that's very important as part of these projects is to have an agreement with community authorities, which is related with uses and customs that each of the communities have. It's important to take this into account when going over these safeguards. What are the uses and customs? What are the resources or the point of view of the authorities as well? Another safeguard is the efficiency of resources and prevention and contamination to promote conservation and sustainable use of resources, emphasis on water, reduce and manage pollution and waste produced by the project. It's important to have proper waste management when implementing a project. And if we have an environmental social management plan, the other one is health and security of communities. We have to anticipate and manage risks to the health and safety of the communities involved in CDA projects, reduce community exposure to communicable
justamente
diseases. We need to have a COVID protocol. We have to make sure not to take diseases from the urban area to the communities. And this was complemented with these physical formats. Wherever we implement projects, we have been placing these mailboxes with infographs. We also implemented a tool to address the mailbox of grievances and complaints mechanisms. We also have an email, very specific email where we can receive complaints. The other safeguard is acquisition of land, restriction of access, and resettling, involuntary resettling. Basically, anticipate and avoid involuntary resettlement and adverse impacts of project restrictions and access to and to use of natural resources. So when we implement these projects, they have to go in hand with conservation of and sustainable protection of habitats. We have to make sure biodiversity, whenever proposals are created, we have to have this tool, safeguarding tool, to keep an eye on what is being implemented. Protecting or
garantizar el
safeguards of
respeto a los derechos de los
indigenous
pueblos indígenas, sus
communities'
necesidades y
rights.
aspiraciones
We have to recognize and guarantee respect for
territorios y medios de vida.
indigenous peoples' rights, dignity, aspirations, culture, traditional knowledge, territories, and nature-based livelihoods. Anticipate and avoid adverse impacts on indigenous peoples. It's important that in community work, we conduct these community meetings or assemblies. We convene all the members of the community and ensure there are no doubts. And if there are questions, communication is very important to clarify all of the doubts when projects are going to be implemented in the communities. Another safeguard is cultural heritage to recognize, respect, and protect cultural heritage, tangible and intangible, from adverse project impacts. Promote equitable sharing of cultural heritage benefits, making sure there is
Tenemos
no
también todo
gender prejudice.
y el plan de acción del mismo.
We have
Nos
all the
de
plan accordingly, and we focus in participatory engagement. We have a highly trained and sensitized personnel. When we talk about involving participation of interested parties, and we also have climate change. These are the safeguards for Centinelas del Agua, and we work in implementing these with each of the projects. This mechanism of addressing grievances is an virtual physical instrument that is accessible and simple that provides the opportunity for any person, institution, association, or group to file complaint or claim when they consider that a Centinela del Agua project negatively affects their interest, well-being, and lifestyle. And here, you're going to see a mailbox that looks very nice, a virtual mailbox, and here everything
Todo el
looks
procedimiento
very good.
ya lo habíamos llevado a las comunidades. Ya se había difundido esta misma información que les estoy dando con las comunidades y por medio de asambleas comunitarias.
Okay, so we are very pleased to implement our things that activating the safeguardings and the procedure. We have received, when we receive a claim or a complaint in one of these mailboxes, it's important to have these boxes, these mailboxes physically. And we have one that's we have it on WhatsApp with a little chicken that runs in many directions. And we found a paper in one of the mailboxes that we weren't sure what it said. And then the alert was activated internally. And then we said, well, let's be calm and see what it says. And the Chapulín Colorado would say, don't panic. And theoretically, we decided that we'd take it to practice. And this is the way that we started with our flow chart to remember what the procedure for this mechanism for grievance and to be able to see internally how we were going to adopt this follow-up. So remember, we also have the virtual suggestion and complaint box. And once we receive the document within the mailbox, then we receive and recovered the whole procedure, and we can see the steps that you go through. And we also send the person a note to advise them that we have received their complaint. Then we proceed with direct action on behalf of the committee to evaluate to see if the complaint is eligible or non-eligible within the mechanism. The response is communicated, and a meeting is organized with the person, and the implementation of the response appears, and this complaint is closed with the respective signature. And so this is a follow-up that we carry out. And then after going through this learning curve, we have learned to have a completely different idea about the implementation of the projects. And it has allowed us to become closer with the community and to enhance the trust with community. This mechanism allows us to have the community as an equal part, an equal partner. And it says we are equal parts, and from that perspective to have our internal diagram of how this supervision and feedback of safeguard, of environmental and social safeguard is going to be carried out, and to evaluate the projects according to the needs of the communities and the direct beneficiaries. So what recommendations can I give you? Well, that they should be projects that are based on local needs, continue with the assemblies on the agenda needs of the communities, clarity on the scope of objectives, and so that they can have clarity as far as what is the future of our project. It is important to constantly evaluate the scope, accessible language, periodic monitoring of complaints. So if you don't let 2 or 3 months go by without checking the mailboxes, you can assign a specific person to supervise these complaints mailboxes.
Vaya a dar el seguimiento adecuado.
Adequate follow-up is important, and to have exclusive mailbox for complaints that we can see here. Remember, we must be very objective from institutional level with this, the way that we address complaints, claims. And immediate and personal response is important. And this is something that we should also carry out directly with the person that has presented the complaint. And this will generate more trust. And here we can see the bond of trust that we are trying to achieve with the community. And I can tell you that the 40 communities with water sentinels working in Quintana Roo, the communities come to look for us, and they ask us, when are we going to have more workshops? Because the bond of trust has been built in a very important manner before implementing these social environmental safeguards. And I can also to overpass this problem of anguish of not knowing what the social environmental safeguards are. We can tell you that now we have overcome this fear. And once you overcome the fear, the safeguard accompanies you.
Con ese mensaje me gustaría cerrar
So
esta
with this message, I would like to close this presentation. I invite you to get to know these safeguards closely and to implement. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alejandro. What an excellent message, excellent presentation. Impressive to see what you have done, what you have achieved in these 2 years. It seems like a long time, but it's a lot of work that you have achieved. My sincere congratulations for what you have done as Centinelas del Agua. And also to this very important, what you mentioned about the mailboxes and the system that you have set up. And also how important it is how the bond has been strengthened with the communities through all the work you have carried out. And I invite our participants now, if you have any concerns, any questions, that you can write them in the chat. This is an hour and a half, this session, so we have time to ask any questions. To our panelists, you can raise your hands, and I think it was already mentioned, but I would like to know, Sam, I have a question.
But can you mention us like maybe some of the highlights, or what are the benefits that the implementation of environmental and social safeguards brought to your organizations, to SACD? I know it's been a lot of work, but what are some of the benefits that you can see at this moment for the implementation?
Thanks, Carla. I really think that the biggest benefit to our organization, rather than to our stakeholders, has really been to standardize our approach to risk management and planning. I had previous careers where I did a lot of risk planning, so it was something I was already familiar with. But you know, it really helped to streamline that process, and it really has reduced the workload when we're developing these projects, to have these tools to be able to, rather than addressing things on an ad hoc basis, to be proactive about how we manage them, so that we're able to be effective and efficient at what we're trying to do.
Thank you so much, Sam. Yes, I think that's really impressive, and all the work that you are also doing, the following part that you do also to comply with this safeguard, it's really, really amazing, inspiring. Also, I see a hand there. It's Jen Chapman. Good morning.
Hi, thank you so much. Good morning. I just want to say, well, first of all, congratulations to both the presenters. They were really fantastic presentations, and it's such an important topic. My question is for Alejandro. So I was wondering, it could be something superficial, but sometimes it can be relevant. I noticed that your feedback box or suggestion box was transparent. And my thought was that it might make people less likely to put in their suggestions because they would be worried that what they're writing is visible. I don't know if you thought about this or if there is a reason you made it transparent that I'm not thinking of, or if anyone has any opinions on it, it will be an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. Bueno, lo hago en español o en inglés.
Como te sientas cómodo, Jen,
Bueno, hay
and we
interpretación,
have,
¿verdad?
we have interpretation. I'm not sure
Okay.
if you are on the English channel, Jen.
Jen habla español, yes.
Okay. So this was a topic of discussion internally to see how we would make this mailbox. And we wanted to make a first attempt. And what we also thought at the beginning when we made these mailboxes, we felt it was important that people could see that there was participation. If somebody placed a paper in the mailbox, other people could see that it was working. And if we had a color, if it had a color that where you could actually see what was inside, if you couldn't see what was inside, then nobody would know if anyone had placed any suggestions or complaints. So that's why we decided to make a transparent box so people could actually be sure that the mailbox was being used and that the mechanism was there and that there are opinions that have been received, and that in this case, this was a project and the beneficiary was concerned because it was about construction of bathrooms, but and the project was of building the sanitary system was almost over, and some people were concerned because they didn't know if they were actually going to complete it, and there was a concern that the project would not be completed, and therefore they wrote their question and they placed it in the mailbox. And in some stores in the communities also have these mailboxes. Also, the cooperatives or the community centers also have these mailboxes available. So people can at any moment go and place their question or concern. And it's very important that they have a way to do this individually and privately. And we did think about having a closed box with that was not transparent, but then we decided to have a pilot project with a transparent mailbox, because we have had the situations when some people have asked whether or not they have received their suggestions, and so we decided to make them this way. Maybe later on we will start to change the method and have a closed container that is not transparent. I mean, and we also had some boxes that were donated, and so we decided to. We feel that when we have like that kind of mailbox, well, people feel, oh, someone is this is being used, so they decide to also contribute with their opinions.
Thank you so much for the answer. Yeah, those are very valuable points that I hadn't thought about. And it will be so interesting to see how your pilot goes and to see if there is a difference in, how people adapt to the boxes. So thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Gracias, Jen, por tu pregunta, y Alejandro por la respuesta. Creo yo que ha
Okay,
sido
so thank you, Alejandro, for the answer. This has given us many things to think about. And I think something that Sam also mentioned, that often we feel, oh, we haven't received any complaints, so everything's fine. But it's important to think that maybe people did not feel the trust, or there might be afraid of some kind of vengeance or some problem if they do express their complaints. So this can incentivize people to actually use it. Not everything is negative, not everything is a complaint. Maybe it could be a concern or it could be a suggestion that does not require a very severe response. So all these mechanisms or methods for addressing the complaints are important. And now that you mention it, Carla, it is also important for the audience to know that do internal work to give attention to the people that are participating with their suggestions, that there will be no problems with the people. They should not fear that the institution is going to get back at them for expressing a complaint. And so it's important to create this trust among the staff so that they can feel completely trusting when they present some kind of complaint or grievance. And it is important to be sure that somebody that receives a complaint should not feel that there will be a problem later on. Okay. So if it's not clear at the institutional level, or if we feel that at the institutional level there is going to be some problem with the person that has offered the complaint, then that is not right. So thank you, Alejandro. And what you mentioned is important, and I would like to comment to the audience that Centinela, when they have their workshops, always talk about this mechanism for grievances. They explain how it works, what the objective is, so they know that they have this option to use this if there is something that they're not happy with, or if there's a difficulty, a concern. And I think it's very important also so that internally they know, they should know what are these mechanisms. So if it is if there is a mechanism, then this is the way to, this is what we should use to present our complaints. And also to know what to do if somebody receives a grievance or complaint, that everything is established.
A todos los que están ahí, tenemos muchas felicitaciones en el chat para
Okay, I would like to thank the viewers. We have a lot of comments in the chat. We have a lot of people that are saying in the chat. There's a question also from Ellie Noriega that says, maybe Sam.
If you would like to share something else, they're asking if the mechanism admits any anonymous complaints, and if it's the case, do you have any example? And what are the times that you have to attend these grievances or these claims?
Sí, bueno, aquí lo hay.
Okay,
Ven
so you can see on the screen, you can see from the time that we receive the complaint, we have 7 days to answer, evaluate the admissibility of the complaint. We have 15 days and assign responsible attention. We have 15 to 30 days. Very good, Alejandro. Excellent procedure. Sam?
So for me, I am very insistent that we do not accept anonymous complaints. That's not to say that we should disregard what is being said. There may be useful insight about the work that we're doing or about the conduct of our teams. So it's not to be disregarded as a comment, but as I've said in the presentation, like the whole point of a grievance mechanism, and to give it its full name, is a grievance and redressal mechanism. You need to achieve that redressal. If there's no redressal, you've got an open complaint that frankly can fester in your communities and start building resent. You need to make it really clear to anyone making a complaint that you need to be able to have their details so that you can follow up with them, have a proper investigation around the complaint, and also be able to communicate to them the response that we're having as an organization, or to be able to direct them to the proper authority to be able to raise their grievance with them. As I said, that is the mark of a good complaint system, is not receiving no complaints, but by accurately and effectively addressing those complaints. And that will create that stronger relationship with your stakeholders, because it's showing them that you care directly about their concerns. So for all of those reasons, I'm sorry, but no anonymous complaints.
Ok, thank you, Sam. No sé, Alejandro, si tú quieras agregar sobre el tema de las
Would you
quejas
like to add something about anonymous complaints? Normally, it's a little more complicated if we have an anonymous complaint, if we could, but then we would have to follow up with the assembly, because we would not know who to direct it to. And part of the mechanism of safeguarding is to actually have an answer, offer an answer. So we do recommend that it should be a name, so that we can have punctual feedback. And now, if there is an anonymous complaint, or they forgot to write the name, then we would have to have a community assembly where we would talk about the issue and see if talk about the issue presented, and see if the assembly, what is the answer the assembly gives, and if they coincide and agree, and that would eventually lead to taking a decision at the level of internal committee, and see what follow-up could be offered. Now, normally, if it is anonymous, we would have to call this community assembly.
It's true. I think that is very complicated to address solutions, and that is the point, to be able to have people feel heard and be able to solve their concerns. So what is done when anonymous complaints are received is that the institution or the organization finds methods of addressing it. If it was something against the staff, an activity, an action, it has to be shared maybe in a wider audience, so that everybody can contribute and also have a proper investigation. If there was something that was not correct or not right on behalf of the team, to understand the reason why this complaint was raised, and to find a way to solve it and make the wider audience. Sam, go ahead.
Yes, no, I just wanted to jump back in, because I think this raises a really important point. Listening to what Alejandro said about anonymous complaints, I think he's got a fantastic way of dealing with that exact situation, and that's really what I wanted to get through my presentation. That this is a journey, right? We can learn through this journey, and even being here today, I'm now learning about how I can improve my own complaints mechanism. I just think that's a really important point, that we should all be working together, and every day is a school day. So I'm pleased that even being a panelist here, I will now be able to go away and tweak our procedure, because I really like that way of a community assembly to address the complaint as a group and retain the anonymity, while also being able to get that redressal. I just thought that was really fantastic and a good learning point for me. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you, Sam. Yes, it was really, really helpful. And I think that it was really interesting what Alejandro shared. Y bueno, la idea realmente de este panel es precisamente lo
So
que...
yes, the idea of this panel is precisely what Sam mentioned and Alejandro mentioned in his presentation. We have here some people here present that have received MARF funding and are implementing safeguarding systems. And the idea is to share each other's experiences, how this process has been, what tips you also have to make this experience less burdensome. Not this process of learning has has been to us, and be able to put into practice what these guidelines and forms have and be able to see the experience gained. With this, I'd like to ask you, what has been the greatest challenge in the implementation of the environmental and social safeguards? Alejandro mentioned something before, but maybe others have the same challenge as you. To start, it is very difficult because there's so much information, and it's so hard to know how to organize it and how to begin. But since you have once you identify these institutional safeguards, it's easier to spread them out and have forms clearly established. When we wanted to implement all of them at the same time, things got complicated. So going by one, gradually was better. And also, it's very important to share the knowledge. As Sam mentioned, there's other organizations that have procedures that they have experience with, study them, study their documents, published materials, and implement this. Another point is was generating an internal committee, because we have to take into account that for each mechanism there has to be objectivity by the internal committee. There have to be no re- but yeah, no retaliation. So the important thing is to have clear formats and addressing them one by one. And as mentioned, as Sam also mentioned, today the most important challenge is to assure a budget to the social and environmental safeguards for the projects, because we do require a person that is fully addressing or attending these mechanisms to have address any of the points or supervision of these. It's important to make sure that a budget is necessary for implementation of these mechanisms. I completely agree that it is very important to see all of this with documents. It's very overwhelming at the beginning, we know, when implementing safeguards, we all know. But now we have a diversity of resources available that are very useful. I encourage you all to go over them. Alejandro has also shared with us some that Centinelas has developed. And the idea here is to share experiences and information with organizations working in the region. That has been the strength over these 2 years. And take advantage of your experience, Alejandro and Sam, who have experience now with this, and we thank you for your support.
Implementation of the safeguards for you and for ACCD?
Sorry, are we talking about the challenges still? Sorry, you
Yeah,
broke up a little. Yes.
the
So
challenge.
so for me, I feel I was very fortunate with the level of support that I got from our fund and also from our other donors in Belize, working how we were going to start developing these safeguards. And I felt that very quickly we got to a point where our safeguards were doing no bad, as I referred to in my presentation. For me, the biggest challenge now is how we're going to take those safeguards and improve them. So we're moving from the not doing bad to the doing good. How are we creating those enabling environments? How are we using these safeguards to an advantage to have a bigger impact? And how can we be more effective at monitoring and making sure that these safeguards are reaching the community beyond what we're already doing? So for me, that's now where the challenge is. I was thankful to get lots of support from our partners and donors. And I hope that moving forwards, we will be able to access a similar support again as we all move forwards on this, as I call it, a journey.
Yes, thank you so much, Sam. Yes, definitely it's a learning process. We are always learning about this. We are always learning how to improve it, how to implement it better. And so, yes, it's been really, really insightful to share with you. And si hay preguntas del público, igual pueden hacerlas. Si no, también les invito. Nosotros
So if
saben
there are
que
questions from the rest of the participants, remember you can keep asking more questions, or we also have a survey that you can all fill out at the end of our webinar. And we thank you. And almost finishing, we would like to ask you to wrap things up. What would be an advice or lesson that you would like to share with other organizations that are starting the implementation process? I know you've given many, but which one would you have liked to have heard when you started? What is something you would have liked to hear right from the start? Alejandro, go ahead. Don't be afraid is the first step. Once you overcome that barrier of fear, it's very easy to implement all these safeguards. Yes, it's true. We hear the word safeguards and see so many guidelines, it's overwhelming. But now we know it's all risk mitigation, and we have to think on improving projects and their benefits socially and environmentally.
or the advice that you would like to share with other organizations that will start with the implementation of the safeguards?
For me, it's institutionalize, institutionalize, institutionalize. It will make you a stronger organization if you can take these safeguards, include them within your policies and procedures, include them within your staff handbooks, your code of conducts. It will make you a stronger, more accountable, more transparent organization. And that really would be the starting block for me. Institutionalize what you can, and then moving forwards, you can refine and adapt. But institutionalize these safeguards wherever you can. It will make you a better organization.
Sí, muchas gracias, Sam. Yes, I agree with that because al momento que nos ponemos los lentes de las salvaguardas y de la gestión de
That
riesgos,
is very true. When we get these in process, it has to be part of our culture. It's a medular part of our organizations and what we do day to day, and the value they have, these safeguards have, is very important to understand them and the benefits that they can bring. They can increase trust also, as Alejandro mentioned, towards communities. And from the start, it can be challenging and can be overwhelming, but we are all in the same boat and we want to continue learning from the rest of the organizations to see how we can improve and implement new ideas. Thank you, Alejandro and Sam. This session has been very, very insightful, very, very full of learning. We have very good, positive comments in the chat box. And thanks to all the information for all those participating. This is going to be recorded, and some here are writing they want to see the recording.
and requiring if you can please share with them the diagram of the grievance mechanism so we can talk about it, and maybe I can share it with them. Also, I think that some people will be writing to your email for this, so thank you so much. I think that was really interesting. Muchas gracias a todos. No sé si hay alguna.
Thank you to everyone. If there are any other questions or if you have any final words that you would like to share with the audience, we will probably have a second. We might meet again in a year and see what improvements we've had. Thank you to everyone.
Hasta luego.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to Marfan for this opportunity. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Vamos a estar compartiendo los videos y la
We
grabación
will be sharing all the videos, a recording of our session today on our webpage and social media. Please share it with everyone who you feel might find it useful and watch it again. Thank you all.
Gracias, Carla. Excelente. Good
Gracias.
job. Hi,
Gracias.
Sam, Alejandro. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Alejandro y Sam.
Welcome.
Muchas gracias.
Estuvo muy interesante. O sea, estuvo súper. Aprendí mucho y creo yo que muchas personas van a aprender y hasta me dan ganas de repetirlo cuando vayamos a
Yeah,
lanzar
Carla says this was so interesting, and she felt that a lot of people are going to want to hear more about it. It's very interesting to hear about these topics from experience. It's going to be very, very valuable.
For the talk, for all the things and the tips that you share with our audience. It was really good. So thank you.
No, you're so welcome. I really do believe that, you know, everyone here, we're all on the same team. Like, the more we can work together, the easier this will be for all of us. We're really all pushing towards the same thing. So anything that I can do to help, then, you know, I've received so much help in the past, then anything I can do to pass that along, I'm more than happy to do.
Great. Thank you, Sam.
No, thank you again.
Gracias.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Have a nice rest of your day, guys. Thank you again.
Nabil, gracias, Gloria.
Thank you. Damos por concluido, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Okay.